Poaching hurts Oregon's fish and wildlife populations. Poaching can take many forms, including illegally killing fish and wildlife, taking fish or wildlife out of season, or using someone else's license or tags. Do your part by reporting wildlife crime. Dial star OSP to report poaching, or call 1-800-452-7888. For more information, visit protectoregonswildlife.com.
Nick, can you go ahead and give us a sound check for a YouTube sound check?
Yes, sound check, sound check, sound check.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, and thanks everyone for your patience as we work through these technological issues. And thanks especially to Michelle and the rest of the team, Bob, Steve, David, for bearing the brunt of the stress this morning. All the rest of us just sat back and worked on other things. So appreciate that. Chair Wall, I'm going to hand this off to you for introductions, and we'll proceed with the director's report. We have a pretty manageable meeting here today, and hopefully we can get all of us, at least those of us in the building, out of here before any potential weather issues. So, Chair Wall.
Thank you, and I would echo your thought, Director Melcher, your point about thanks to the staff for taking all the stress and getting us back online. And welcome to Those of you who are online and who were patient and waited for us, thank you all. Welcome to the meeting. I would like to acknowledge that some of the materials got to the commissioners and the public later than we like to get them, but they got to you. And today we will, when we get to the recruitment topic, we will be being informed and ask a lot of questions, but we won't be making our decision today. So appreciate everybody being here. I'm Mary Wall, Chair of the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission, and would like to call the Friday, January 12th, 2024 Commission meeting to order. I live in Langlois on the South Coast, and let's go to introductions for the other commissioners. Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, will you start? Whoops, I think
And
you're muted.
Good morning. I'm Becky Hatfield Hyde, and I am calling in from windy and cold Brothers, Oregon this morning. And so I hope everybody who's traveling is safe and careful today.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mark Labhart is on the phone. Could you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Mark Labhart. I live in Sisters. Apologies, our internet service is down in Sisters today, but at least we've got power, so that's the main thing. So, good morning.
Thank you. Commissioner King, the one in the room, go ahead and introduce yourself if you will.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Dr. Leslie King, representing Portland, where they're in a blind panic for the threat of snow. Nothing has happened yet. So I have managed to get here safe and sound. I'm sure I'll get home safe and sound and deal with all the traffic snarls. Good to be here. Nice to see all of you.
Thank you. Commissioner Spellbrink.
Yeah, good morning. Bob Spellbrink, Sonoma, Oregon.
Thank you. Commissioner Khalil.
Hi, Kathy and Khalil, living in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you. Director Melcher.
Thank you, Chair Wall, and thank you, commissioners, and apologies for the technological issues, but we also, made the last minute decision to pivot late yesterday afternoon and allow you all to participate virtually. And sometimes things don't quite go as we planned, but we're here now and it's all working. So thank you. Commissioners, we have under the director's report a number of items. We did provide the field reports to you in written form and would certainly entertain any questions that you might have on that report. We will have an expenditure report, and Shannon Hearn, Deputy Director for Administration, is in the room here. Shannon, come on up.
Well, we're waiting for Shannon to get up to the microphone. Michelle, will you introduce yourself and let people know anything they need to know for this meeting?
Good morning. I'm Michelle Tate. I'm here today to provide support for the commission and the director to provide this meeting hybrid model. And I want to thank everyone for your patience this morning. We spent 3 hours last week testing the equipment and getting things to roll, and then walk into this morning to issues that we didn't experience at all. And so I appreciate your understanding with the challenges of technology in our time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, Shannon.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Director Melcher, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde. Thank you for your patience this morning and the opportunity to get on the agenda. In your packet, you do have the latest financial expenditure report. It was a closeout as of November 30th, and at that time, we were 20.8% through the biennium. We are tracking just under that on an expenditure rate, so we are not anticipating any major budget shortfalls and are doing well with this rollout of the 23-25 budget. For ending balance, we have a total of 127.1 million. That's 66.5 million in unrestricted cash and 60.6 million in restricted cash. So we're doing very well. I did put in quite a lengthy paragraph summarizing where we're at with the 25-27 budget development. But basically what that paragraph says is that we are getting instructions from the governor's office and Capital Finance and DAS that this budget development process will look different. We've gotten additional timelines and check-ins with our policy advisors and our capital finance policy analysts. The first deadline that I shared in there is January 22nd, and that's when our policy option packages from the agency in simple draft form are due. Same with legislative concepts. And then we'll meet with our policy advisor and our analysts several times up until we bring a package to you. And if you guys remember, June is when we need to bring an agency request budget to you to get approval so that we can submit it to DAS in August. So we don't have a completely clear picture yet of what the instructions will be. We are anticipating more information and more clarity here over the next several weeks. And my plan is to come back in February and update you with a timeline of budget development and how that does look different. And the other thing I wanted to update you on is that we do know the information as it develops is being shared with agencies, but also stakeholders and partners. So we know there is transparency in this as it develops. And then last but not least, for the financial report, I had an audit update. Pretty simple. Our auditor is wrapping up the hazardous spill response audit and then an education program spending audit, which is a subset of the INE audit that the ODF&W Audit Committee recommended. And that concludes the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Are there questions for Shannon?
Yes, this is Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead, Mark.
Okay, Shannon, I just wanted to make sure, and I clearly hear what you're saying. Things are pretty fluid right now, but the External Budget Advisory Committee will still be stood up and be able to comment prior to getting it to the commissioners, right?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart. So that everyone knows, the External Budget Advisory Committee is a group of stakeholders for the agency that we would put together. We would typically meet twice, starting in the spring and then right before the June meeting. And then additionally, we would run town halls. So with these new deadlines, I'm reviewing our standard scheduling with the External Budget Advisory Committee and the running of those town halls against where we're now meeting deadlines with the governor's office and what input we would be asking from the public. And I'll try and highlight that better in February. We still very much want to engage the public on our budget. It may look differently, but those stakeholders will still be engaged somehow, some way on a certain schedule. I just don't know the timing of that yet, really.
Okay, thank you.
Shannon, one other question. What about the February session? Do you know any more about what we can expect for our budget in the February session? What proposals or changes?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. For the short sessions, the agency isn't allowed to bring forth any new concepts, but we do work with the Chief Financial Office and the Legislative Fiscal Office on any technical budget adjustments. There are places in our 23-25 budget where we need more limitation, or there was some supply budgets that were not fully allocated. And so we've messaged that over there. But other than that, there is no ask the agency can make. It's really around the realm of technical adjustments. Bills have not been introduced yet. So most of the information we have about what will happen during February 20 session, I would kind of put in the rumor category at this point. We have heard that there is a wildlife omnibus bill being considered. We've heard there may be components of that. We've been asked for information. That's all the agency can provide is factual information about positions or what we do as an agency as they're developing those budgets and those bills. And that's all I know at this time.
Thank you. That helps actually.
Well, thanks, Shannon. Just an additional note on the External Budget Advisory Committee. I think, commissioners, one of the most valuable role that the EBAC plays for us is when we're in fee increase development mode, if you will. And of course, we have not had a fee increase since the 2015 legislative session, but we will certainly, if there is need for any fee increases, we will certainly be engaging closely with EBAC and shaping those to, based on their advice. So we're not abandoning EBAC, I guess is what I'm saying, and they will still be a very valuable piece of our of our budget development process.
Great.
Thanks. Thanks, Shannon. Next up and participating virtually, we have our standing Adapting to Climate and Ocean Change report, and this will be a presentation from Dr. Leif Rasmussen in our Marine Reserve project, Marine Reserves project. Sean Clemens may want to introduce this topic, and hopefully we've got Leif online and he can jump into the details.
Thanks, Kurt. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Commission, and Director Melcher. It's kind of odd sitting here and not seeing anyone. So apologize for that. For the record, Sean Clements, the Acting Deputy Director in Fish and Wildlife. And I just wanted to provide some brief context for this presentation. So as you are aware, we're managing in the face of increasing complexity. A lot of it due to the impacts of climate and ocean change on our species and habitats. And because of that, we are increasingly reliant on the data to help us manage those species. And if you recall back to the adoption of the climate and ocean change policy, we had some key principles in there around science. And they were really meant to direct us to collect the information about these changes in the environment that are important to species, understand how those are impacting species, and guide us in how we can manage to conserve and harvest those species. And so you've had a presentation in December, which showed you how we're adapting some of our monitoring around stream temperature and how we're using that to make decisions. And you're going to hear a presentation today from Dr. Rasmussen about how we're approaching the changes in hypoxia we're seeing to inform our management. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Leif Rasmussen for the rest of the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with you. I'm going to share my screen and put up some slides here that we can all look at. Commissioner Labhart, these are the same slides I showed to OCRF earlier this week. So even though you're on the phone, you should actually still kind of know what we're talking about. So fortunately, this shouldn't be too new. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Dr. Leif Rasmussen. I work for the Marine Resources Program as the Marine Fisheries Research Project Leader, and I'm also the co-chair of Oregon's Ocean Acidification Hypoxia Council. And what I'm going to chat with you a little bit today about is basically how hypoxia is affecting fish's behavior, and in turn, our ability to monitor and count those fish. So in a mathematical sense, hypoxia is when the amount of oxygen in the water drops below 2 milligrams per liter. That doesn't really matter for what we're talking about here, but that is the true definition. And I'll point out any times we get to actual hypoxia on graphs to make things simple. But in our oceans, the way we get hypoxia is that it's pulled in by upwelling. So let's walk through that process. So basically in our summertime, our winds come from our north along the shore, as you can see over here in this plot. And because of our Coriolis effect, those surface waters are pushed offshore. That makes a hole in the ocean right near the beach. Obviously, we can't really have a hole in the ocean right near the beach. So what happens is waters from down deep are pumped up and onto the shelf to replace and fill that hole back in. Over time, those waters come from farther out and deeper. And out deep over here, this is the steep part, the continental slope, we have a thing called the oxygen minimum zone. It's a totally normal thing that occurs throughout the world's ocean. And as small animals and plants in the top of the ocean fall and decompose, as they get deep enough, the respiration uses up all the oxygen, and they're so far down, there's no light, so there's no way to replace that oxygen. And so we have a naturally occurring hypoxic zone throughout the world's oceans. But with our upwelling, we pull this water up onto our shelves when we have long enough and strong enough upwelling events. And what that does is it creates this low oxygen environment, this hypoxic environment on our continental shelf. So what does that mean? If we're pulling this low oxygen water onto our shelf, how are the fish and animals responding to this? So this is a continuum of 100% oxygen on the left to no oxygen on the right. And obviously we have 100% oxygen, things are normal. The fish are going to behave normally. It's going to look as though what you think of when you see videos on TV or things like that. As oxygen starts to decline, the mobile species start to avoid the area. Obviously, if you can't breathe, you start moving out. Once you hit the hypoxic threshold, this point right here, by and large, fish are absent from the populations. As it continues to decline, then crab and shrimp disappear from the population. And by the time you get to 0%, we have 100% mortality of animals, and the actual functional chemistry of the sediment is changed. So obviously I said that fish are moving, and this is going to have impacts on our ability to manage fisheries. So on the left, what we have over here is data from the International Pacific Halibut Commission survey. The colors are the oxygen levels. The pink colors means it's hypoxic. And the black that you're seeing is where they actually deployed their long lines to look for halibut. And these X's up off the Washington coast are overlaying where there's hypoxia. Where there's no oxygen, there were no halibut. And this affected their ability to do a stock assessment. It's gonna skew your data. Coming over here on the right, this is the NOAA bottom trawl survey. This goes from the Mexican border to the Canadian border. And what they see in this situation, I apologize, their oxygen data is a little confusing the way I have plotted, but as we have lower oxygen over here on the left, we have a lower number of species we see on our trawls. And as we have more oxygen, we see more species. So not just the number of fish or like the density of fish, but we also see a change in the species composition and things associated with that. So this is obviously affecting our ability to manage these stocks. But if you remember back when I was talking about how hypoxia is formed and how these dynamics work, I kept saying upwelling is normal, the oxygen minimum zone is normal. What's our nexus to climate change here? Well, climate models have shown that with climate change, we're going to have more and stronger winds from the north during the summer. So this means we're going to have longer, stronger hypoxia pulling onto our shelves, and the response of these fish is going to change because it's going to be a longer time. They're going to effectively have to hold their breath. We can all hold our breath usually for half a minute to a minute, but what about a day? Most of us can't, so we have to do something different. So how is ODFW going to adapt to that? There's kind of three big things that we've been doing to look at hypoxia and what we can understand. The first thing is we've been doing some research on how these fish are behaving, and I'll show you some of those data that we have and kind of how things are going with that. The other thing is if fish are moving and changing their dynamics and location, it's going to make it harder to manage. So we've done a proof of concept survey to go out and try and figure out, do we have a way we can count fish? And just by luck, it was a very hypoxic year, as I'll show you. So we're actually also able to test some adaptive management strategies for how to incorporate hypoxia in our work. And the last things I won't present too much here is I've been part of some studies where we're looking at how fishermen will actually respond to hypoxia and changing oceans. Will they have to move? Will they have to change what stocks they're using? Will they have to change gear? Things like this. And we look at the economic and social impacts and ecological impacts of all these things in kind of one rolled up study. So for the focus of this study, we're going to move into the near shore. I showed you the halibut and the trawl survey out on the shelf. Those are great big surveys, but in Oregon, when we go to the beach, we see that near shore water. Our recreational anglers are usually fishing in the near shore. And when they go out fishing in the near shore, bottom fish are key. Over here on the right, you have the four kind of main types of trips that we sell to our charter fleet. And what you see is this biggest bar right here on the left, bottom fish, is worth about $17 million per year, followed by salmon at $5.5 million. So bottom fish are really kind of the driving thing for that nearshore ocean fishery. And if we look at what fish we're catching when we go on these trips, over here on your x-axis, you have the number of fish landed, all the species, but what stands out is this giant bar in the middle, and that's black rockfish. Black rockfish are basically our bread and butter of our recreational ocean fleet. They're a cornerstone. So trying to understand them is really an essential component for us as we move towards trying to do these things for better stock assessments. So what we did is in 2021, we did the first ever black rockfish survey for Oregon's waters. This was funded by the Restoration Enhancement Board, so it's a one-off proof of concept type survey. But what we did is we went from the Washington border to the California border on this vessel you see down here. And we used a fancy fish finder, underwater camera, and some hook and line sampling to count the number of fish that we saw throughout the state. And then we used an oceanographic sampling tool. I need that actually to correct the speed of sound in the ocean for my fish finder, but it also gave us insight into that hypoxia and those ocean conditions. And it's a good thing we did, because here on the left, this is a plot from a mooring that's off of Cape Perpetua. The x-axis is the time of the year. The y-axis is dissolved oxygen. This dashed line, anytime we're below it, we're hypoxic, and anytime above it, we're not in hypoxic. It's normoxic conditions. Red line is 2021. And what you see is that most of 2021 is below that hypoxic line. 2021 was a rough year for us on the Oregon coast. And if you go out here into late August, early September, it was fully anoxic. We were at 0% off of Cape Perpetua. if we look at this over on the right, what I also have here is a map of where hypoxia was on the coast. So the blue is where there was low oxygen. And there's two cool things I want to point out with you, or to you with this plot. The first thing is this plot was the first time we've ever been able to do something like this, because we took our survey data. Nobody had ever looked in the nearshore at what oxygen looked like. We took those other surveys I told you about and some other NOAA and other federal surveys, and we put all of our data together to make first ever picture like this. So collaboration across agencies allows us to finally start to understand some of these dynamics. And the other thing is, if you look down south, near Cape Blanco and further south, it's bright red. That means there's lots of oxygen. So hypoxia is not an on-off switch for Oregon, it's highly regional. So as we look at these adaptive responses, we can't be thinking in just Oregon on-off, but we have to be thinking in regional and adapting as that hypoxia moves in real time. So what do we do? How do we address this problem? We were out there, we're seeing hypoxia, so we got on the phone and we said, hey, can we find a little extra money and make this proof of concept survey not just about doing a better stock assessment, but also try and test and see how hypoxia is going to affect things? And they said yes, and so what we did is we turned the boat around and we redid the survey in that middle area where it had been hypoxic. The yellow line shows you where we started the second survey. Black line is the oxygen level, and we're well above this red line showing us where hypoxia is. So we're good. Our second pass, as we call it, was in a good situation, a good time for us to allow do the survey. We could look at normoxia. So what do we do during the survey? On that first pass, we were at sea for 44 days, and we collected 3,500 kilometers of acoustics. During the second survey, we were at sea for 10 days and we collected 1,000 kilometers of acoustics. The reason I tell you this is when we did this survey, this was 2021, still kind of peak COVID, my team was at sea or quarantined voluntarily from August 1st until December 1st. They missed holidays with family, visiting family to be able to do this work and keep the staff safe. And I just really want to commend them for giving up multiple months of their lives to do this important work. So kind of what are the little dig-in type data that we got? So we got almost 300 of those oceanographic samples. We fished in about 55 places. We have almost 600 video drops and about 700 or 800 fish were caught. So we have this massive data set that we can now start looking at how we can do a better job with our stock assessments from a fisheries management standpoint, but we also can start learning about hypoxia and how we can handle those data. So what we have over here on our left is oxygen, and on our y-axis is the density of fish. And what you see is that as we move from this low oxygen area over here at 0, and the oxygen starts rising, we start to see more and more fish. This tracks with what we see in other data, but basically fish don't like hypoxic events. Over here on the right, what we have is the shelf depth. Beach over here on the left, out deep over here on the right. The red is that first pass, and the blue is that second pass. And what you see is that they're concentrating when it's hypoxic in the shallows and out deep and avoiding this kind of middle depth. When we come back into regular conditions, they're more spread out. So like I said, the main goal of this project actually was to put this into stock assessments. So what we did is we went through an international review for 5 days with the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. They said, this is good science. You can use it in stock assessments. We gave a number to the stock assessors. I sat on the stock assessment team and we put these data in. And this is what it looks like. X-axis is year, the y-axis is number of fish. Don't worry too much about what it means, but 1 is number of fish before people existed, 0 is no fish in the ocean. Green, yellow, and red, those are management tools the council uses. Basically, fish hard, start pumping your brakes, slam on the brakes when you hit red. And when we do a stock assessment where there are no survey data, we end up in this black line on the bottom. Basically, the survey, without the survey, we end up in a very low situation. If we put the survey in and say, hey, we trust it, but only a little bit, you've only done it once, you end up at this blue line. And this is actually what we used because we wanted to be a little uncertain because we'd only done it once. But if we increase our certainty in our survey, then our ability and how much it shows the size of the population rises dramatically. And over here, you can see the difference between this bottom bar, which is this bottom line, and this top bar, which is this top line. The difference in fully trusting or fully excluding that survey is $20 million in revenue difference to those fisheries. So what's driving the behavior of these fish? What we see here on the x-axis is the time of the day. Gray bars are night, white bars are day. This is depth on the bottom and acceleration on the top. And what you see is this is a deacon rockfish. During the night, they're actually laying hard on the bottom. They go to their rock and they're not moving much. They're not swimming around much. We come over here to where it's hypoxic. They don't go down to the bottom. They don't hit their high accelerations. They don't hit their low accelerations. They're just milling around. Then we start looking at where they are in location on the reef. These black dots are millions of observations of fish over time, high oxygen, normal oxygen, and hypoxia on the right. And what you see is during normal oxygen, there's 3 reefs that these fish just hang out on all the time. They have their home reef, their home rock, like I talked about, that they like. But when hypoxia hits, they start milling around, moving around, trying to find air. This also affects the fisher's ability to catch fish. So what we have on our x-axis is oxygen, and the y-axis is how many fish we catch per hour. The red box is the hypoxic event, and we have different species. So if we look at black rockfish, you see we catch fewer fish per hour when it's hypoxic. Same thing for lingcod or deacon rockfish. Cabezon are weird. We actually catch more of them when it's hypoxic. I don't know why. We need to do more research into these things. And if you look at something like quillback, there really doesn't seem to be an effect of hypoxia. So the effects of these things are not consistent across species. Okay, so wrapping it up, just kind of the few take-homes, the important things we should all remember. Upwelling is getting stronger with climate change, and therefore hypoxia is going to get more severe. And that hypoxia is going to affect our ability to count fish and for fishers to catch fish. If we continue to survey fish and do this research, we can see how they're responding to conditions and adapt to those. We also learn about the dynamics in a physical sense of these things, which allow us to do a better job predicting these changes. And I just presented nearshore fish, but it does affect those shelf species, Dungeness crab, and many others. Just very quickly, I hope this doesn't come across as a doom and gloom presentation. I don't view it that way. I truly believe that what we've shown here is that we can adapt, and by continuing to do these things, we can keep fishers on the water into the future, and we have the skill set within ODFW to make things be a good future for all of us. And with that, I can take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? I have one, Leif, and actually to both you and Sean, it was useful to get the framing the way you did this report. It actually was very informative, at least as I was listening to it. And it didn't seem like just doom and gloom. I have a question. You talked about how if we know more and have confidence in the data, then we know when we can fish and when we can't fish. You also said that with climate change, the hypoxia would become more severe, and I think you also said more often, but I know you said more severe. So how do those two things relate? Do we have to just keep, well, I'll just stop. That's the question. How do you relate the fact that we get better information and then we can fish more because we know when to stop, and we're going to have more and more hypoxia and more problems for those fish?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. So like I showed you that map of where hypoxia was, obviously those fish have to move. So it could be that most of our fish move into the Southern Oregon coast. So if we are surveying, we know they're collapsing into our Southern Oregon coast, we could allow the fishers to use those fish there. If they're moving into Washington, obviously we'd have to pump our brakes a little bit. The other thing is with these changes, there's also the bigger climate change shifts that we're having. And so things like canary rockfish, we know and hypothesize are going to leave Oregon's waters. But we also have kelp bass and some other species that are more robust to these hypoxic events, and they're starting to move into our waters. And so getting out there will also let us see this fish, the new species coming in, and those that are leaving and being adaptive there. So it's a giant problem of putting all these things together. But if we have this annual picture looking at the ocean that's going on out there, we can kind of be adaptive in driving things there. Are the fish dying? No. I mean, by and large, fish are mobile organisms. They're not going to just lay on the bottom and die and not breathe. It's just like us. If we can't breathe, most of us are going to fight to survive and get out of the area we are. So they're going to go somewhere else. It's just if they're within our waters or someone else's waters. Does that answer your question, Chair Wall?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde. Looks like you're muted.
Sorry, I think Commissioner Spellbrink was ahead of me.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Spellbrink.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Super interesting, Dr. Rasmussen. Spent 40 years out there running around out there, and I learned more in the last 15 minutes than I did in 40 years, so really interesting. Go back and digest a little bit more of it. But I was just wondering, it sounded like you spent a lot of time looking at that hypoxic area there off Cape Perpetua. Was there any noticeable difference as far as what the water looked like, water color, when in a hypoxia, when you have severe hypoxia versus 100% oxygen?
So not during when it's hypoxic, but like preceding that, what happens is we get these highly robust, that upwelling first thing, you start bringing up all those nutrients from down deep and you get that really dark green water. So you kind of get this leading up to type event that you start seeing. But during the hypoxic, it doesn't stand out from what you see during kind of normal summer brown green water type thing.
Right, that's why I was interested. Yeah, you notice all those things when you're living out there, and anyway, and just example of when after a big upwelling event back in the salmon fishing days, you basically just turned west and ran till you got to the water edge, to where the water warmed up a little bit. It pushed all those salmon offshore. But super interesting. Really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde.
Yes, Dr. Rasmussen, thank you so much for this really interesting presentation. I am curious about what was the role of upwelling in the past in a normal regime? Like, I mean, that's one of my questions. Like, and I have other questions, but maybe just ask that one first.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So upwelling is basically why we actually have such a great ocean here, and why we have so many fish. It brings those nutrients from down deep, and so that basically creates lots of food and these great food webs that we have. So it's just a normal thing. We're very fortunate actually to live here. It's why we have such a productive ocean. The association with hypoxia, if you go down off Peru, that's also an upwelling system. Their shelf is completely devoid of life and has been for as long as we've been recording things, because their upwelling's even stronger and they've been having hypoxia that beyond what we could even fathom here for as long as we've known. So these types of relationships between hypoxia and upwelling are normal. It's just, how is the relationship changing because of climate change?
Okay, and my mind just thinks of cattle, livestock, and overgrazing. So if you have a hypoxia event in Cape Perpetua and the fish then move somewhere else, is that crowding out other fish's opportunity to feed? Or I know this is, I hope that doesn't sound like a completely silly question, but.
No, that's a really good question. It's not one I've thought too much about. And I think it depends on what the food source that's available for that fish that's moving to where it is. I didn't present on this work, but I have a paper that's coming out looking at the number of baby crabs that are returning, Dungeness crabs. And what we're finding actually is when it's a marine heat wave, this other climate change effect that we have going on, they do really well. We get like this extra twofold survival of juveniles. And on the bottom, you're looking at 200 to 300 baby Dungeness crabs per square meter. That's a giant food source. So in that situation, if you have a heat wave when you have hypoxia, well, we're also throwing this giant food source in there from our Dungeness crabs. So maybe that'll be a mitigating effect for them, those fishes going into that area. But yeah, it's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it, and it's one we should dive into more.
And then my last question would be, if you have, is there the long-term monitoring of hypoxia, is there like a place where you could just go on a website right now and see where hypoxia is on the West Coast? Sort of, okay.
So the pictures, the big map type things that you look at, like those colorful maps, that happens when a boat moves through an area. And that's what gives us kind of those top-down pictures. But that red line, those are for when we put moorings or buoys in the water. And those give us that 1 point in place and time. Off of Yaquina Head, there's a buoy run by the Ocean Observing Initiative. And so that's where we have probably our longest term data set. They actually keep their buoy out now during the winter, but most people take their buoys out in the winter. As we know, we're having a big storm and a giant buoy just washed up on the beach in Yachats. So those pictures, yes, they're good. Sometimes they last in the winter. It's not uncommon for them to show up on the beach and then they're not too accurate. So yeah, we need better observations. We, as the Ocean Acidification Hypoxia Council, have an annual meeting with the fishermen. It's a Fishermen Scientist Roundtable Exchange. And we've talked about trying to put more sensors onto fishing boats so that they can give us more insight, because the reality is the fishermen are the one out there. They're the ones who can do more for us, and we can help them, they can help us. So OSU has research going into that. And so the hope is to get those kind of things in the future, but I wouldn't say there's a great picture available right this moment in the kind of top down.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I know, for example, the suckers in Klamath Lake, they don't move, right? When the water temperature gets terrible.
Yeah.
And the oxygen gets terrible. And so I'm glad that the ocean fish at least move around. Thank you. Really super interesting. Okay.
Dr. Rasmussen, I had one other question I wanted to ask, and I think it's a real short one. You mentioned the Cape Blanco area and that it was red. Could you say a bit more about what you meant?
Yeah, because I was using other people's figures, the colors on those plots were changing of when it was hypoxic versus basically having good oxygen. So in that one, red meant there was lots of oxygen. And so when we did our survey, when you get south of Cape Blanco, there was heavy amounts of oxygen. The fish were behaving normally and all things were looking good from a hypoxia standpoint. Obviously, I'm sure you have all heard about lack of kelp and other things like that, but that's what I was meaning is the color was red on that graph, just trying to help draw our eyes. But yes, there was good oxygen. Things were kind of normal down there. Normal.
Thank you. Thanks for that report and for mentioning that what your staff went through to get us all of this information. That was very interesting. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you for all of your time.
Thanks, Leaf. Don't leave yet though, because Commissioner King here in the room has a question, as do I. So Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you all. And it is hard to let you guys know, I could put up my little card thingy, but yeah, no one would see it, but us sitting here, it's pretty funny. Yeah, exactly. Wave to Bob in the attic. So my question, thank you for the presentation, Dr. Rasmussen. My question is, I agree, it's kind of good to hear that it's not just doom and gloom and all bad out there, but I'm still struggling, and I think a number of you have touched on the issue that I'm struggling with is we're now almost 10 years out from the blob, the marine heat wave, and that was mass death. Everybody talks about that was the biggest extinction in human history and on and on and on, the badness that is happening. We're still trying to comprehend the badness that happened out there, that it was absolutely a shift in in kind of the whole ocean that I'm understanding now. So how does that, I guess that was a heat wave and not hypoxia, or was it hypoxia? How is this relating? Because I agree, it just seems like the shifting fish moving around, that's just a symptom of a problem. Okay, yeah, they can swim and go somewhere else, but it's still a mess down there. So can you, I guess, help me make more sense of that?
Yeah, so the heat wave and hypoxia they're linked in the sense that there's climate change drivers of what's going on in both situations, but they're not linked. The causes and the movement, that upwelling of hypoxia, is not associated with what's driving that heat wave. And so, yeah, it's a very complex problem. I mean, there is associated die-offs and things like that associated with those heat waves. But like I said, also looking at that heat wave, we're looking at, based on our predictions, we can predict the fisheries out of that crab data. We're looking at probably some of the highest abundance years in the crab fishery coming up because of those heat waves. So we're getting these flips back and forth. And so I try and not just view the negatives. I try and view like, okay, there's going to be shifts, there's going to be changes, there's winners and losers and all these things. And can we try and understand which species are those winners and which are those losers? My hope is no losers result in extinction. That is not something we want. Fortunately, much of our species could move north. Canary rockfish, perfect example. Best example or suggestion is they're going to end up in Alaska. We're not going to be able to fish them here, but they're not extinct. That's okay. I mean, at least we still have that fish. It's a change to what we have here. We're having other species move into our area. So I guess that's kind of how the balance of those things are going, as is you have the climate change shift of just this larger along the west coast, which meaning Alaska to Mexico shift of things moving north. That said, something like halibut, they're moving south. So again, these are complex. Some things want to go into where it's warmer, some want to go where it's colder. And so that's why, again, getting on the water all the time is what's going to save us, because then we can say, oh, something's starting to come in. We can see it. We can maybe start fishing for it or pump those brakes. Squid, I know you have all heard a lot about those. That's something that's moving in following those changing waters. With the heat waves, you know, much of those heat waves that we hear about aren't directly driving a lot of what we see in Oregon. When they're saying that heat wave, that's really the middle of the, you know, Pacific Gyre. It's huge for salmon. Salmonids are going out and feeding in those areas for certain species. But from the groundfish that I'm looking at and things like that, you know, their home range are the size of my 10 by 12 office, that like without hypoxia, they're not moving a lot. So those really warm events way out deep like that, it's a pretty far disconnect between the two. I've been working with NOAA scientists actually trying to get them to build us heat wave data for the Oregon shelf. I said, you can't just tell me the middle of the ocean. I need it for Oregon. I need it here. If you want me to try and understand how my fish are responding, I need data for here. And so we're finally getting to the point where instead of them just giving us these, the ocean's changing in the entire Pacific Ocean, the ocean in Oregon is changing. And so we're starting to drill down, and then we'll be able to better get at that question. Hopefully I answered your question. If I went wandering off too much, please tell me and I will try and rephrase myself. I apologize.
No, I think you did mostly, and I think it's important to state, like, if they are different, then state that it is different. Like, I just think about just life with my own little fish tank. Like when the water gets hot, there's less oxygen, and you can see the fish, they're like panting in there. So it seems to me they're linked, but they might be linked in ways that we're not expecting. And as you're stating, there's going to be winners and losers, as is all of climate change. There's going to be winners and losers in this.
Yeah. And so that hypoxic water that's coming up, the oxygen minimum zone's at like 200 to 500 meters down. So it's cold, it's old, and it's low oxygen and high nutrients. So the temperature of that hypoxic waters is not associated with that heat wave. It's cold. So it is, yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you. That has been very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Lee.
Question.
Oh, go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
So, Dr. Rasmussen, I want to thank you again. This is the second time I've heard your presentation, and I learned more the second time, I think, than I did the first time. But I want to, as I mentioned in the previous meeting, give a shout out to Mark Weigart and Sue Cudd at the Whiskey Creek Shellfish Hatchery. They were the very first ones, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but started the process of trying to understand ocean acidification and the issues around ocean acidification, and their work with Oregon State University to try to figure out what was going on in the ocean. And so they were, in my opinion, kind of the leaders of getting this thing going and getting the research dollars to help you and others to find out what is actually happening out there in the ocean. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them. Thanks.
Yes, that's very true. They definitely led a lot of that ocean acidification work. And the reason that ocean acidification was brought up is in my OCRF talk, I talked about both ocean acidification and hypoxia. Here, I've just winnowed it down to hypoxia. So that's kind of the linkage. If you ever would like, I would be happy to come back and talk about ocean acidification as well. Stuff we're also working a lot on and excited to talk about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Leif. And just, I guess for the record, I wanted to note that I do know that you're not the Marine Reserves project leader. That's Dr. Aylesworth. So they had reserves in this little in the agenda here, and that got me confused. But anyway, thanks for the presentation. I do have one question, and you can answer it quickly, or you can say, let's talk later. And that is, How do you reconcile, when you look at your graphic of the hypoxia of Cape Perpetua and the normoxia south of Cape Blanco, how do you reconcile that with the fact that, at least my recollection of oceanography, is the strongest upwelling every year, it seems, is south of Cape Blanco? Is there something else going on there, or?
Yeah, so right at Cape Blanco, there's a thing called a jet. And so basically, when we think of upwelling, we think of kind of just this general U on its side of, water coming up from deep and then going offshore on the surface. But there's also this kind of tube of water right off Cape Blanco that's shooting water straight offshore. And what that does is it pulls water from the south to feed into that jet. And that kind of creates this pulling of water from the Brookings area and fills that back in and slows down some of those upwelled oxygen minimum zone waters coming in. So in a very high level, that jet is what's kind of saving us there.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Leif. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Chair Wall, that takes us to ratification of temporary rules. We do have a small number, I believe 3 temporary rules that require your ratification and that's the case anytime you all meet. You have to ratify any temporary rules that have been adopted since your last meeting. So happy to answer any questions on those.
Kurt, I have one question, but I was going to save it for later unless, well, let me just tell you what it is. We had 2 rules on white sturgeon, both of them for just a day apart. And I was wondering what the basis was for those, the outcomes, what we needed from those. It looks like 2 that are very closely related. I'm happy to just skip the explanation and talk to Sean after, unless there's something that could be answered in like a couple sentences about those 2 that are very closely related.
Sure, and I see Mike Harrington coming up, so we'll let him give you the specifics. But of course, we manage the individual fisheries in the individual reservoirs with separate quotas, and the quotas in those reservoirs are very small. So I suspect it's really just some quota management work in season. But Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair Wall, thanks for the question. Yeah, it's very simple. Kurt's on spot there. The first temp rule was simply to separate the season into 3 days a week as opposed to all the way through, so that we could just extend opportunity. The second rule was because the first day that season was opened, I believe it was January 1st, or it was a weekend, spectacular weather. Everybody went fishing, and lo and behold, I think they caught 85% of the quota or something like that in the very first day. And so we had to then close the fishery because we had bumped up against that quota. So hence the second rule.
Thank you. That's real helpful.
Yep, no problem. Thanks.
Commissioners, any other questions? If not, could I get a motion on the temporary rules?
I'd move to ratify the 3 temporary rules set forth on the January 12th, 2024 agenda.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I can second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to ratify the 3 temporary rules as read into the record. And Michelle, can we do a roll call on this, since we have one person who's hidden from view?
Spellbrink,
Yes.
Labhart,
Yes.
Hatfield Hyde,
Yes.
Khalil,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Wall.
Yes. Thank you. Then the next item is other business, and Director Melcher, I have nothing on this one unless do you have anything that you need to cover?
Chair Wall, no, I have nothing under other business. Unless there's individual commission updates, I think we could go on to public forum.
Great. Thank you all. And on public forum, we have 4 people ready to testify and I think one person was planning to be, one or two were planning to be in person. So if we could start with John Rosapepe, and I think that he's online. And each person will have 3 minutes. So if you could go ahead, John, and then after John will be John Rains, and then Cliff Bellew, and then Lynn Tompkins. So John Rosapepe. He was online earlier. And commissioners, you also, I think we got a video from him this week, so.
Yes. I saw a message somewhere in there that he couldn't wait for the delay or something.
No.
He's in,
no,
and Michelle is
here.
just.
I am here.
Michelle is, yeah, there you go. So he's in the meeting room now, and Chair Wall, I will run the 3-minute timer here, and just since you're not sitting here in the room with me, I will take the liberty and be the deliverer of bad news when folks run up against their 3 minutes.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to go off video because my connection's iffy, so apologies for that. Yes, my name's John Rosapepe. I'm the Pacific Northwest representative for the Endangered Species Coalition. We have over 12,000 members throughout the state in Oregon. I was happy to meet most of you a year ago in Portland at the Audubon, and we've testified a couple of times in the past year before the commission, and we worked down in the legislature last year on wolf issues. And I wanted to comment for last month. Unfortunately, my connection wasn't good with the way the audio was running, so I'm taking this time. I want to thank the Department and Commission for having the workshops on wolf conservation and management in Oregon last month. As far as going forward, we hope, having decided not to revise the plan and making implementation changes, we hope the process, not only hope, but we expect it to be accountable, transparent, and also to be a public process. We hope the implementation is rooted in the best available science. Best available science concludes, among other things, the most effective way to prevent livestock wolf conflicts is the proactive use of non-lethal conflict prevention tools and strategies. Killing wolves to prevent conflicts can be counterproductive at times and is not a long-term solution. I sent everyone a webinar that was done in last year in October. It's called The Science of Coexisting with Large Carnivores. It has both biological science and social science. There's 2 panels. It runs 3 hours. Dr. Mark Elbrock, Dr. Bridget Van Holt, Dr. Naomi Longhorn, Dr. Bruce Cutter, and Dr. Trevis. It's moderated by our own Oregon State University's Dr. Paul Nelson. If you have time, it's worth your while. The only other comment I have is, as we all know, sanctioned lethal take has doubled this year from the previous year. And I guess one of the things I didn't hear during the conversation, or much during the conversation, is how do we make what's going on there? Are non-lethal measures not being used? Are non-lethal measures not being used enough? And how do we get back, since the wolf population hasn't, in the last several years, hasn't expanded or increased, what is going on? And so I would hope going forward that the department and the commission looks to how we can correct this and make sure that we have those measures in place so that we don't have to kill the wolves. Yeah,
Thanks, John. And you're at the end of your time.
Okay, just real quickly, working with Dr. Carter Niemeyer, he always said in doing wolf investigations, you need to take your time and get it right. And I hope we do that going forward. Once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. The next person is John Rains, who was originally planning to be in person, I believe. Is he in the room,
Yeah.
Director? Butcher?
Yes, he's in the room. He's coming up, and we'll have Craig
Cliff
Ballou
Ballou.
also.
I could show somebody here.
So that's not Craig Ballou there? Oh, okay.
His name wasn't called for the public forum. Requesting just traveled up here. Got a copy of the email.
Well, just go ahead. We'll just let him come on, even if, yeah. So go ahead and
I
come
just
up
wanted to say
too.
that before I started my time.
You can come up too.
Okay, so my name is John Rains. I'm from Myrtle Creek, Oregon, and I want to speak on the subject of tribal tags. And this year has come to our attention that the commission issued tribal tags to 6 different tribes, consisting of 3 deer tags in addition to their tag that they get from ODF&W. The neglect of the commission to protect our black-tailed deer herd, in my opinion, is embarrassing. I don't understand why, but this has put our deer herd in jeopardy like never before. So this year, you guys introduced a new hunt, the Dixon Hunt, a late season hunt, 17 tags, over 1,200 applicants, very coveted tag. My son was lucky enough to draw one of the tags that he put in for 17 years. So he drew the tag. We hunted for 8 days, saw over 80 bucks, 100 does a day. Most of these bucks being mature bucks, the breeding bucks, and all in a small, like 10 square mile area. Basically, these deer are unprotected at this time of year. In contrast, I hunted with my daughter the same amount of days. We saw 5 bucks in probably a couple 100 square miles of area. Covered a lot of country. 4 of the bucks being Forked-horns. The 5th buck, not even a 4-year-old buck. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that these deer this time of year they're like shooting fish in a barrel. My analogy would be what you guys have allowed to happen. It would be like opening up the fish ladders at Bonneville for tribal netting. That's basically, those fish are so vulnerable when they're in the fish ladders. These deer are vulnerable this time of year from November 10th to the end of December. Just can't have that much harvest. Unsustainable. Sport hunting is what we do. Nobody needs these deer to survive on. If somebody says they need 3 deer to survive on, I ask you, how did you survive last year when you didn't have 3 extra deer, or the year before that? Don't need it to survive on. We're sport hunters. Also, I've heard that, well, we're just, we're not going to shoot the big bucks. But when we took my son's buck into the taxidermist showed us several bucks that he stated were harvested by tribal members. And he also said that those tribal members said, well, I've got a nice one. Now I'm going to go back and look for a big one. To me, that's not subsistence hunting. That's trophy hunting like we do. Yet we have to pay for it, put in the time. And now you're allowing up to 4,500 tags. I don't know how many, because I asked the public record for the number, never got a response. But if you're allowing that many tags in that area, you're going to destroy our deer herd in just a number of years. Thank you.
Thanks. And so since you weren't on the agenda, go ahead and tell us your name. And
My name is Rick Waddle, and I sent the email in. I got a response. He showed you on his phone there. I don't know why I didn't make my name on the list to talk today, but I would like to talk about the tribal tags also from a slightly different perspective.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to talk about the ODFW giving black-tailed deer tags to the tribe that allow them to hunt from August 16th through December 31st with a rifle. I've hunted the Southwest Oregon Cascades for 47 years. In that time, there has never been a rifle hunt for black-tailed deer that started before September 25th. There also has never been a rifle hunt for black-tailed deer that started after November 10th, the key date. These tags will greatly impact the ability of the deer to forage, to migrate, and most importantly, the ability to breed undisturbed. The decision by the ODF&W to allow these tags that run from August 16th until December 31st will completely destroy the black-tailed deer population on the National Forest and BLM lands in 2 to 3 years. Explanation of that, deer go into the rut in the Cascades roughly between November 10th to December 10th. During that time, they have no fear of man, none whatsoever. This is the only time dominant breeding age bucks can be seen on a regular basis. You can drive the roads and see them. We take pictures of them. We enjoy seeing them. I have no problem with the tribe hunting wildlife following the Oregon big game hunting regulations that come out in print and online at the end of each year. However, these tags that allow rifle black-tailed deer hunting from August 16th through December 31st are unfair to all hunters in Oregon who are not part of a tribe. This is not fair to the general public who have faithfully purchased hunting license and deer tags their whole life. We, the hunters of Oregon, pay for the ODFW to intelligently manage the black-tailed herds, not for them to be destroyed. This is not fair to the deer. They have to deal with starvation, predation, poaching, and now unrelenting rifle hunting that continues when they are in the rut at their most vulnerable time of the year. Please let the deer have a much needed break from rifle hunters after November 10th so they may breed undisturbed and put on fat necessary to carry them through the winter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And is there, Director Melcher, is there somebody else in the room?
No,
Hello.
that is all we have in the room. We have Cliff Ballou, I believe, ready to speak online, if I
Great.
pronounced his name correctly.
And then we'll go to Lynn Tompkins after that.
Yes.
Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, commissioners. My name's Cliff Ballou, and I also would like to speak about the tribal tag issuing topic. Our wildlife is owned by the state of Oregon, and it should be managed equally and fairly for the whole populace of the state, and not just for a select few to be able to over-harvest game at the expense of fellow citizens and our future generations. This is a sport that is handed down to future generations and young hunters, and this tag issuing is going to affect that. Our deer herds are in decline in the state as predation is at an all-time high. Cougars, bears, and wolves. And this procedure cannot withstand over-harvesting with these additional tags. I have a really good friend that is part of the tribes, and he even thinks that this is not sustainable for our future generations of hunting. The tag numbers that I have came across, and I don't know if these are true, but this is what I found, are there 4,500 tags good for harvesting 3 deer each. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's the numbers I found. That comes out to 13,500 allowable deer to be harvested from August through December. This would allow hunting with high-powered rifles through the peak of the rut and during times when deer would be congregated on wintering grounds. This is a recipe for a slaughter of mature bucks and will have an irreparable effect on the deer population, not only in sheer numbers of deer harvested, but will also reduce fawn numbers as the breeding bucks will be removed from the herds, resulting in a loss of reproduction. I think we should learn from our past mistakes, as this exact practice has taken place in the Metolius unit. I know because I've had a tag there. 20 years ago, the Metolius unit was one of Oregon's premier mule deer hunting areas. Tribal hunting has been allowed over the past several years, and now I would say that that unit is not even worth putting in for. The over-harvesting has decimated the deer population in that unit. This is a sad state of affairs and poor management of our wildlife resources. Let's learn from this and not repeat the same mistakes. ODF&W is tasked with managing our wildlife resources. We, the people of the state of Oregon, expect this to be done fairly, equitably, and accurately to preserve our natural resources. This tribal tag issuance is none of those things. I implore you as a citizen and recreational hunter of the state that you not allow this detrimental action to continue to take place, managing our deer herds for their vitality and recreation and not just a select few. Thank you for your time. I'd ask you to consider the folks that are speaking today.
Thank you, Cliff. Thanks for testifying. The next person is Lynn Tompkins. Go ahead, Lynn.
Whoops. There we go. Sorry. All right. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Lynn Tompkins. I'm the director of Blue Mountain Wildlife, a wildlife rehabilitation and education center located in Pendleton. I've been a rehabilitator for 35 years and have rehabilitated Washington birds with the full support of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife for more than 20 years in compliance with the Oregon administrative rules. To clarify, rehabilitated birds are always released where they were originally found. So Washington, birds. There has never been an incidence of disease being spread between any birds being cared for at Blue Mountain Wildlife. Since 2014, we've admitted 6,600 Oregon birds and nearly 5,000 Washington birds, releasing 34% and 64% respectively. The release rates differ because the majority of the Oregon birds are injured and can't be successfully treated, while a large percentage of the Washington birds are nestling barn owls that are displaced when the haystacks they are in get nesting in get moved. The nestlings are usually uninjured and can be raised using a method called hacking that simulates the care provided by their appearance. Most birds are admitted as a result of human activity. Cars, windows, and cats are the three leading causes of injury. Lead poisoning is also a factor in raptors, especially eagles. In response to the most recent outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza, we've updated our biosecurity protocols and created a standalone intake center, allowing the admission, examination, and quarantine of migratory birds. We take the health and safety of the birds under our care and that of our resident ambassador birds very seriously. Any high-risk HPAI species who are good candidates for rehabilitation are quarantined and tested by the Oregon Veterinary Diagnostic Lab in Corvallis, and these include bald eagles, red-tailed hawks, and great horned owls. Waterfowl and shorebirds are also high risk for HPAI, and at the request of ODFW, we've not been admitting those species. ODFW is going to allow the rehabilitation of young waterfowl this spring with the notification of the rehabilitator's district biologist. We rarely admit waterfowl, but we do admit hundreds of raptors and songbirds. These birds are released parasite and disease-free, improving the health of the wild population. Since ODFW has revised its policy on admitting waterfowl and shorebirds, I'm hoping the transportation of migratory birds across the state line can once again be allowed. I'm requesting permission to resume admitting Washington birds to BMW's Pendleton Center. Thank you for your consideration of my request.
Thank you, including for putting the ask in a single sentence so that it was so clear. So appreciate it. I think that concludes public forum then, unless, Kurt, is there anybody else that's in the room?
No, Chair Wall, that does conclude public forum.
Perfect. Then let's go on, commissioners, if we can, to the minutes. And if there are any questions that any of you have, if we could get a hands up.
Well, we can with Mark, poor darling.
Okay. Well, I bet. Seeing no questions and hearing no question, could I get a motion to approve the minutes, please?
Sure, I'll read it. I have it here. I move to approve the December 15th, 2023 meeting minutes and continued authority to correct grammar and punctuation.
Is there a second? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the December 15th, 2023 meeting minutes. Could we have a roll call, Michelle?
Khalil?
Yes.
Yes,
King?
sorry, I was looking at the motions.
King?
Yes.
Labhart?
Yes.
Spellbrink?
Yes.
Hatfield Hyde?
Yes.
Wall?
Yes. Thank you all. And I think then we can move to Exhibit B. And this one, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, is talking about the recruitment plan for the executive director of the agency. It's not an action item. We're not going to take a motion at the end of this. We're going to hear from the director and the other people that are working on this and get all of the information that we can. We can ask questions. We do have a few people that would like to testify on this. And as you noted in the materials, as you read through it, we will have other opportunities for the public to weigh in on this. But if we could start first with a thank you to Kurt for his work putting the material together, and it's been under a very tight time frame. So thank you, Kurt, for all of your work on this. And I think that we're ready for the presentation of the recruitment plan. And Kurt, is somebody from the consulting firm there with you, or are you going to start off by yourself?
Well, thank you, Chair Wall. No, I am here. I'm here by myself in the room with Commissioner King and a few other folks, but I did want to clarify a little bit. And so we do have a draft motion for you. It's not a firm action, but the draft motion, just for the record, as we move forward here, is to approve the draft recruitment plan and receive additional public comments prior to the final commission approval sometime at a yet to be scheduled meeting. So there is a motion, but it's not a final motion, if you will. Okay. Well, yeah, commissioners, thank you very much. And then I would just, I'll go through, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. You have received, of course, the packet of information, which includes the draft recruitment plan and other items. I wanted to just share a few thoughts before I walk you through that document and answer any questions that you might have. And the first thing I wanted to share is that, of course, well, I guess let me back up. The first thing I want to share is that I've been incredibly honored and privileged to serve in this role for the last decade, or almost decade now. And I think that you all know that anyway, and it goes without saying, but I did want to mention, of course, and you all have heard me say before that I consider that this future agenda item is the most important honor and privilege, I believe, that has been bestowed upon the commission through statute is hiring the agency director. And it's an incredibly important decision. It's also, because you are a public commission, it's also a very public process. It's not, it's not like hiring a CEO for a private entity. This will be a public process, and so we will be very careful that we're not crossing any lines as it relates to Oregon Public Meetings law or serial decision making or any of the other things. So just bear with us as we work through the process and recognize that it is a very public process. I'm not going to read through the agenda item summary. You all, I'm sure, have read that. I do want to go to attachment 2, which is the draft recruitment plan. I'm just going to walk you through this very briefly here this morning. Of course, we're here today, and we are presenting, or I am presenting you with the draft recruitment plan as well as the position description, some minimum qualifications for the position, some key attributes of a successful candidate. We will also talk a little bit about the screening process. The draft recruitment plan was posted on the internet on our website. Actually, not on January 11th. It was done on January 10th, but nonetheless, it was posted a couple days ago. We will have, I think, a few public comments on it here today, but we will also be taking the opportunity over the next couple of weeks to hear additional public comment, either in writing or at a subsequent meeting when you give final approval to the recruitment plan. Let's see. And then, so moving forward, and I'll just tell you that I'm being very, perhaps too aggressive or ambitious here, but I am sticking with, right now at least, the plan to have this position filled by the end of March. Of course, I'll be departing at the end of March, so that's what I'm driving for right now. Fully recognizing that the dates in this recruitment plan may change, and if that's the case, then so be it. But nonetheless, I am driving for that March decision. We will need to, and we'll send a doodle poll out to you all, but we will need to schedule a commission meeting sometime in late January for the commission to approve the final recruitment plan. And so we'll work with all of you on that. It will be a virtual, this will be a full virtual meeting. We will entertain only, electronic participation at that meeting, both from you all as well as from the public. We hope then here in late January to have the position posted, the recruitment announcement posted, and open for a month. In late February, the executive recruiter will process the applications that we receive and review the applications to determine who meets minimum qualifications, as well as we'll be looking at veterans preference. The finalists that meet the minimum qualifications then will be subject to a screening process by the screening panel. And the screening panel is right now envisioned to be 2 commissioners, a representative from the governor's office and the executive recruiter. For the real meat of the process, then, after finalists are selected by the screening panel, what we have proposed here is that all the final candidates will meet here in Salem for what we're calling a candidates public forum. And this would be where each candidate will have a handful of questions to answer. We'll have the public develop those questions and the executive recruiter determine which questions get asked. Each candidate will be sequestered so that the latest interviewing candidates don't have the advanced knowledge of what the questions are. And then also at a date to be determined, we expect that the final candidates will meet with Governor Kotek or her representative. And then the commission will interview the final candidates in executive session at the March 15th commission meeting. You will have to go out of executive session to actually make the appointment. So you'll discuss it in executive session, then you'll return to a public session to have a motion and a vote on the final candidate. And then you would delegate the authority, the final hiring paperwork authority, to the chair to work out the details with the successful candidate. Additionally, in this packet, you have, as I mentioned, the position description. You have minimum qualifications You have draft desirable attributes and characteristics. And, and we did develop a list of stakeholders. And it's an extensive list that we expect that the executive recruiter will likely use and interview some subset of those stakeholders in developing this process. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question here in the room.
Go ahead, Commissioner King, and then.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wall. My question is just looking at it, like you said, this ambitious timeline. So the final candidates public forum, March 15th, that's the day of our commission meeting. So they will be doing a public forum here in Salem, but we'll be in Roseburg doing our executive session and are these things are disconnected? And
Yeah,
how
no.
will that work?
No, it's a really good question. And actually what I think will likely happen, Chair Wall and Commissioner King, and these dates are
Fluid.
really tentative.
Yeah.
And so I actually expect that would probably be on the Thursday prior to our commission meeting.
Okay.
Or some other day that week. It would not be, it does not have to be associated with the actual commission meeting.
Okay.
However, I will say it may make more sense to think about if we stay on this schedule, it may make sense to think about the March meeting location, as it's much easier to have executive session and candidates, depending on where they're coming from. We don't know where they'll be coming from. It may be much easier to have it here. So we'll have to work out those details. And I mean, April, I think is in Tillamook, so we have the same issue.
Right. No, I'm just wondering, just how the moving parts are going to work, because that public forum is just that. It's not necessarily the commission. And so we need to, those are disconnected events. Even if we're within Salem, they'd be different.
Yeah, the Chair Wall and Commissioner King, the expectation, the public forum is not scored. The expectation is so that the commission observes it, so they can see, so you can see how candidates react in a public meeting setting, answering questions that they may or may not be comfortable answering. But it's not, at least as it's envisioned right now, there is no hard scoring associated with a public forum.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioners, there are several components to the plan, but what you just heard was the overview plan itself. What's this process look like? Let's take these one at a time. Are there questions that you have about the process? Other questions in addition to Dr. King's question about the plan overview that Kurt just described?
This is Mark. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Kurt, we're using the Modus recruiters, is that correct? That national firm to develop this?
Yes.
Yeah, Chair Wall and Commissioner Labhart, it's a little more complicated than that. Let me just say that we also have, so Modus is certainly going to be engaged, and they'll be engaged on the outreach and in developing an applicant pool and going through their channels. We're also working with the Department of Administrative Services, and they have an executive recruiter that works on recruiting for executive positions. And the Department of Administrative Services individual is much more familiar with all of the legal issues associated with recruiting in these very public processes versus the kind of the closed door non-public processes that occur in many situations. So we will have both engaged, both a state executive recruiter as well as Motus, which is a company that does executive recruitments. And then, of course, we're working very closely with the Department of Justice and the governor's office on this. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen here, and we're just trying to make sure we get a plate of food on the table.
Okay, so I was involved just a little bit from the periphery. Lisa Hanson, who's now the new director of the Department of Ag, when she left OWEB as the executive director there to the Department of Ag, Modus was involved in that process. And so I quizzed her just a little bit about the process with Modus. And she was extremely pleased with the process that Modus used. And I'm sure DAS and others, the governor's office, because that was a governor appointment position in Department of Ag. But she was very complimentary when I talked to her about Modus, about the professionalism that they provided, the definite involvement of the public, the stakeholders that were definitely interested in the Department of Ag director position. So I came away from the conversation with her with some pretty positive feedback about Modus itself and how professional they are and crossing the T's and dotting all the I's. So I just wanted to let the other commissioners know that, at least that perspective. And they, she said that they could reach out to her, Lisa Hanson, the director of Department of Ag. Any commissioners have any questions of what's this Modus? What are they all about? What kind of company? Because it sounds like they're a well-respected firm that does executive recruitments. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Labhart.
Other questions, commissioners, on the overview itself, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask a few questions about each of the components too before we go to public testimony. But any other questions about the plan itself? And Kurt, just for clarity, there's some room for, you mentioned that there would be public input and that we'll have some time for public input on this, not just today. So changes may be coming on this, both the timing and a few of the pieces of this plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chair Wall. And so as we envision it here is we're just sharing with you the draft process, the draft plan. We'll come back at a future meeting, hopefully not waiting until February, but if that's what it has to be, we can wait until the February meeting. Coming back at a special meeting for this topic only to approve the final recruitment plan. The dates, though, they can, even though if you adopt a recruitment plan that says we're going to do step X on March 15th, and then we can't get step X done on March 15th, the dates are not binding. You can move, we can change the dates as we need to through the process. So that's what we're envisioning right now. It'll be 2 steps here at the initial outset to make sure we get good public comment, and then we'll get this position announced and start gathering candidates.
Terrific. And I should have said at the start, Kurt, that there will be lots of opportunities for all of us to talk about you as the director and what this means, and speak to that. We're skipping that for today, not because we don't want to get into that, but because we want to get through this plan today. But be assured we will come back to that. So I don't see any other questions immediately on the plan itself, and I'd like to make sure that, because I misstated it at the start, that we're really clear what we're doing today with this plan before we go through the other components of it that are underlying the general plan. We will be essentially, if we make a motion today, it will be a provisional approval of the plan, and we will come back and make a final one after we go through today's process and give the public a chance to weigh in, and that includes all of us having a chance to weigh in on these components. So Kurt, make sure that I'd like to check just to make sure that's your understanding as well.
Yes, Chair Wall, that's correct.
Then commissioners, could we take a look for a minute at or talk about the position description? And Kurt, I have a couple questions for you about it. I don't know if you were prepared to just walk through it or say anything about it, but I do have a few questions that might get us into it if you aren't.
I was not going to walk through it, Chair Wall, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions. And I may or may not, depending on the nature of the question, I may or may not be able to answer it.
And I think it's just fine because, again, people will have a chance to weigh in. We're introducing these documents now and these plans, but people will have a chance to weigh in later. But could you, the position description that we have now in front of us is very much like the one that we had in the last round when the then sitting commission hired you. So could you talk a little bit about the updates that you did to this one? And then I'd like to follow up with a couple other questions.
Sure, Chair Wall. Most of the updates that were made to this position description were what I would consider housekeeping or technical adjustments. So corrected the size of the agency budget, corrected the number of FTEs, corrected the position classification and the classification title, because those all changed in the last several years. I think there was some housekeeping related to divisions. Of course, we have a habitat division now that we did not have 10 years ago. But overall, it was largely housekeeping type of changes.
Okay. And commissioners, when you're looking at this, you are of course looking for anything else that you would recommend to update this from 2014 to now a decade later, 2024. Kurt, I'd like to ask a question, just another general one, and it helps to just hear how you put this together. You have a reputation for excelling in an agency that is seen as being well run. The finances are in good order. This is a well administered agency. Are there pieces, and again, I sure don't need a bunch of answers right now, but it would be useful to know if there, as you look through, especially the agency administration piece, if there are parts of that that need to be updated to reflect where we are now, and that it is a very well run agency. Do we need 40% of your time on it? But more importantly, are there substantive changes that need to be made in these in the items under administration?
Yeah, I think, Chair Wall, I don't, from my perspective, I don't think so. And I think, when I say I reviewed this and made mostly technical changes, that's because at least in my opinion, those were the only changes that needed to be made. I think, the reality is whether you have 40% of your time on agency administration or 30% of your time on agency administration, I don't think that really changes how the director approaches the role of being the director. But this is, I would say, to say that the director spends 40% of their time on agency administration is, I think, a reflection of what needs to be done, and that's how it's occurred for the last decade or perhaps longer. But it's an important piece. You can't just be the big picture policy person and effectively run an agency with 1,300 employees and 93 facilities and 100 and some odd different programs and all the complexities of the budget, the revenue. We're much different than a lot of government. We generate mostly our own revenue, and we track that much differently than most of government. So I think administration is a really important part of this job.
That's you, and I agree that the actual percentage that we put on there isn't perhaps as important as just looking at what it took to have a very well-run agency and how do we keep that, because that's critical and it serves the agency well. So that was useful. We have a question from Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde.
Thank you. First, I have to say, Director Melcher, that I am sure there is all kinds of celebrations that will unfold to thank you for years of service to this agency, not just as a director, but your whole career. So I very much look forward to that celebration. Maybe we'll have some surprises. Who knows? Who knows what will happen, right? I think one of the things I want to say about this process is, aren't we in a great position right now as an agency to hire a new director? We have a really stable agency, something to be extremely proud of in Oregon. Not only that, we have a director that just finished being the, what is it called? The executive, the person with OFWA. Kurt, what's that called? What was your role with what?
President.
Thank you. I was dropping the term. I couldn't remember what it's called, but that means that Oregon has been on the national radar here in the last year. This department is financially stable. It's not, it's well run. We have a leadership team under Director Melcher that has been gaining experience, presents professionally to our commission when they come to us. We aren't perfect, but we're pretty darn good. And I think that that's going to be noticed when people want to come here. I think I look at other states that feel more unstable to me, and more unstable with issues, even issues surrounding the different communities in Oregon that we're trying to serve. So I say all that just to say that I think that when I look at this job description, frankly, I'm so thankful that I'm not applying. I mean, this position requires so much, you know, and mostly though, at the end of the day, I think it requires deep integrity to deal with all the issues that we're facing, whether it's, you know, our rural communities, facing certain things, whether we're looking at climate change, whether we're looking at, you know, the changes that are coming in the demographics of our state. They're all important. And I don't mean to be just giving like a I don't know what this is, grandstanding or something, but this is a really neat opportunity. And I sort of like the ambitious timeline, because the people that need to jump in and be considered for this position, they need to just get with it and know that this is really what they want to do, and we need to just move through the process. I have one tiny thing, Chair Wall, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but in the desired attributes, this is very much nitpicking something. There's one bullet point, and it says a change agent who understands and appreciates both the interests and concerns of traditional stakeholders and those of citizens whose engagement with habitat, fish, and wildlife is primarily wildlife viewing, hiking, habitat protection, and conservation, and or the ecosystem services provided by the public resource assets. One of the things that I really think is important is that we not divide up our communities unnecessarily. For example, I think what is meant here by traditional stakeholders would be probably your hunting, fishing, trapping crowd. But frankly, I know a lot of hunting, fishing, trapping crowd that is deeply interested in wildlife viewing, habitat protection and conservation, ecosystem services, hiking. So I know I'm nitpicking there, but if there's a way we could rework that to be really inclusive of Oregon without divvying us up into things, into little categories. And then with that, I will just stop talking.
Well, it happens, thank you, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, and I think it just happens that another commissioner has similar views on that point and might have a suggestion for how to change that one. And so Commissioner King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. And it is a perfect segue. I was sort of waiting as we went through. That was attachment 5, and I don't know what attachment we're on. So I was waiting till that came up. And Chair Wall had sent me these bullets of desired attributes and asked me to help her with some of the wordsmithing, with some of the comments, like, how can we say this? In fact, her draft, she actually deleted it. So we can't blame the technology on that one. She actually, we did some edits and then she forgot to send it. So what she asked me to do last night when she realized her error, she said, hey, can you read the edits to the bullet that you did that we will eventually include in the final documentation? Because it touches on just that. We were trying to move away from that triggering language. We're trying to move away from things that divide and trying to say things and it say the same thing in a very different way. So I will read to you, and again, this will be sent and it will actually be included in the actual bullets. The change agent one will go away. What will go in its place are these. So I'll just read them. And again, they'll be in print. They'll be in the final. This is a draft. It'll be in the final. Okay. So just to read it, and you'll be able to see it in text later. So what I could, instead of saying change agent, I said a generational diplomat, someone who understands the background and history, specifically as it pertains to traditional stakeholders, but also acknowledges the need to pivot to a more inclusive organization. A bridger who recognizes and can seize the moment to build a bigger tent by changing the preposition from an or to an and. Specifically, this means a fuller embrace of the conservation element of the outdoors, so that ODFW becomes a place for both hunters and hikers. So I think that touches on what Chair Wall was trying to say without the triggering language. And I also added a second one just to kind of fluff it up a little bit. Understanding, experience, and willingness to incorporate the reality of climate change into the everyday culture of ODFW. This includes leading by example within our own department, i.e. sustainability metrics like capital construction projects, electric vehicles, recycling, plus a shift in our overall fish, wildlife, and their habitats management policies, i.e. a bigger picture of understanding of climate change with the recognition that this is not the time for incremental change. Again, specific examples might include a full examination of the timing of existing season start dates when compared to data confirming seasonal weather climate shifts. So those were the two that I added, and we would omit the change agent because I think maybe that brings that to the fore without immediately everyone going into their corner and sharpening their varying weapons, their varying projectiles or whatever. So of course we can edit that even more because this is again a draft, but that was sort of my first stab as per Chair Wall. And then of course, then we didn't send you the document. So we're sorry about that. That's all I have.
Commissioner Hatfield Hyde, I know you haven't seen the actual words in print, but did that sound closer to the point you were trying to make? And if so, then we can submit that as an option. We can submit what Commissioner King read.
Yes. First of all, I appreciate the effort to try to acknowledge that we should be very thoughtful around this. Since I can't see the language and we're on the fly, it does sound like we're getting warmer. But I guess that's the question I have as well. As this is a draft process, we could potentially even sharpen that a wee bit more if we needed to. Is that the way?
I would agree. Yes.
Okay,
I mean, this was literally Chair Wall sent me this. It was all in this flurry of paperwork and getting things ready for our packet and so on. She sent it to me one evening. I made some comments and sent it back. I hadn't seen it again until she asked, when we realized that it didn't make it into the final. So this really was a first stab. It is by no means done. It was just our brainstorming and thinking.
Yep. Okay, perfect. And I think it's good work. It's good effort. I probably, I love to edit and think about things too. So well, let's leave it at that for now. And I'll try to get my hand to go down. I think I have 2 hands down, or I'm number 2. I shouldn't be talking. Commissioner Khalil should be talking. Oh dear, we're back in the virtual environment, you guys.
Totally
Okay.
fine. There are
Thank
no
you.
right answers.
Leo.
This may be somewhere that I haven't looked yet, but has there been any discussion of running some of these, some of this language through an equity check lens, like Textio? There are a lot of different programs that do equity checks for hirings and job postings. And so I was curious if that was part of the conversation, because I see, words like citizen and questions about degrees, that's what they're called. I'm just curious what conversation has been there about that.
I have not been in a conversation about that one. I haven't heard, but Director Melcher may have and may be able to give a better answer. If not, we can get a better answer for you. Director Melcher?
Yeah, Chair Wall and Commissioner Khalil, we have not done that, but I expect in particular as it relates to the language that goes into the job posting, the public facing posting, that will definitely, and I'll be looking to our experts. That's why I hire them to dig into things like that. But I think it's a good comment, and I've made a note of it.
Yeah, I figured it was not within our necessarily within our purview, but it is also not happening everywhere. So I just wanted to check and see if that was part of what we're considering.
Thank you. Along those same lines, in the program direction and vision parts of the position description, 2 themes that have come up over and over and over in the last several years that I think that are either missing or could be stronger in these descriptions. One of them is that in the program direction and vision, we cover emerging challenges, including climate change, water shortages, biodiversity loss. And so that is a piece that should be at least mentioned in the position description as something that would be within the purview of the director. And the other one, in external coordination, an important role that this agency has had, and I think has exhibited a lot of leadership on, is cross-agency work and looking for solutions. And Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, you've spoken eloquently on this in the past, so you may want to add or revise what I say, but it seems to me that that's an arena that we should at least mention. You could find it in the paragraphs that are in the position description already, but I think that cross-agency work is so important, and it's how we accomplish so much with the new habitat division and our landscape scale solutions to some of our fish and wildlife problems, that we need to make sure that that's in there as well. And again, people will have a chance to weigh in on, you have a chance to read through these. We're just trying to get ideas and questions on the table now. So I would look to the commissioners. Are there any other pieces of the draft attributes or the draft job description that you wanted to specifically mention and ask that they be looked at?
Chair Wall, this is Commissioner King. I don't have I've already given my bits about the attributes, and are we going to go through the rest like the stakeholders? Because that was another document he asked me to look, and we added quite a few. But again, that is by no means complete. So do we need to talk about that as well? And any more additions to that document?
We certainly can talk about that, and let's go to that one now. And the director did a lot of work pulling together a very extensive list and added several names already to it, and or not names, organizations. So could you speak to yours, Commissioner King? And if others have questions about where that list is right now or additions to it, let's hear those now. But first, if you will go, Dr. King.
Yes, so the draft, thank you, Chair Wall. The draft that you asked me to look at, I added quite a few names, which that did make it into the draft. So I added, I don't know, my goodness, I'm trying to find it now. Sorry. Like I said, a lot was happening really quickly. Okay, so here I have it. So a bunch of the ones that I asked for and you have added were things like Get Hooked, I'm Hooked, ELSO Inc., Lower Columbia River Estuary Partnership. So those are on there. There was one that I forgot, and we kind of had a text exchange, which was the Western Environmental Law Center. And I thought of that because of Sristy. She was there at the Wolf workshop. Yeah, was it on there? Okay, there was a bunch, and there was, so the names were jockeying back and forth. So I just wanted to make sure that, there was some that I saw that were missed, some that I just completely missed. They were there and I didn't see them. So I just want to make sure other commissioners also are seeing this, since we kind of had the boo-boo about the attributes. It does look like that one got through, in terms of, I did see some of the ones that I'd added on this version.
Thank you, Commissioner King. And just to reiterate, Dr. King the boo-boo was mine, and I meant to forward it when I received it, and it ended up in my draft email, not in my sent. So my apologies on that one. Commissioner Hatfield Hyde.
Yeah, I guess I would on the stakeholder, I would like us to err on the side of being really inclusive here. And one of the things I saw on the draft stakeholder list was, for example, watershed councils, but they were the watershed councils, I think, in the Portland area, there's watershed councils, in every community in the state. I guess this is hard for me because, how do we actually make sure that we include the folks that need to be included? And maybe I could even ask Director Melcher what some of his thinking was in terms of this initial list, or how other states grapple with this, and also the other thing I'm concerned about is we have not heard from Commissioner Labhart, and maybe he's just being quiet because he's
on the phone.
But usually I would be expecting a whole list of things from him. So did we lose him, or are we not recognizing him? Just another thought.
Thank you. I believe he's still on the phone.
Thank you. Getting a little bit of feedback. Does it sound like I'm doubling up here? It sounds like I'm my phone.
It sounds okay. Go ahead, and we'll let you know if it starts giving back echo.
Okay. First one, attachment 6, and I appreciate Michelle sending this out on the 10th because I still had internet then, so I was able to look at all the minimum qualification, position descriptions, and stakeholders. And I did get your stakeholders, Mary, and I did send some comments back. I think it's also really important that the tribes are not stakeholders. The tribes are sovereign entities, and that we want to make sure that they are involved. All 9 tribes in Oregon are involved in that process for input for this. I'm not so much concerned about the minimum qualifications. I think that we've covered those pretty well with those additions that folks have had, and the position descriptions. I support what I think I heard. I think we're gonna have one more chance at the end of the month, though, to take a look at the draft, because I was trying to listen carefully to what Commissioner King was saying, and it's tough for me with a phone hookup to capture everything, but I think we're gonna get another chance to look at that draft at the end of January and then move out on it. So I'm generally okay with everything I'm hearing. And it's going to be really important for me that we have a lot of public process here to make sure that those who want to have an opportunity to weigh in and give us their opinions on what they're looking for in a director for this agency, because I think it's key there, a key part of what makes this agency it is, and that is the partnership that we have with landowners, stakeholders, tribes, other agencies, state, federal, local agencies, the folks that we work with on a daily basis in the field at the legislative level. And I think I mentioned to you, Barry, that there's probably some key legislators that we need to reach out to that are interested in fish and wildlife matters. And I think it would be very important that we reach out to legislators so that they can have a chance to weigh in. Also, I think some of them might feel slighted if we didn't reach out to them because they are friends of the agencies, and some maybe not friends of the agencies that would like to comment. So we need to make sure that they're in the mix with that also. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. I think what would be useful is, Director Melcher, if you could mention some of the uses to which the stakeholder list will be put, because there are various places where that list will be tapped, and we'll be looking for input from the people on that list. One of them, of course, is that when the announcement goes out, those groups all will be looking at the announcement and perhaps identifying people that might want to apply. But Director Melcher, can you talk about what is already in the process so that stakeholders and the public will have a chance to weigh in? And then I think we should go to the people who signed up to testify so we can hear from them, and then we can come back to questions and points that the commissioners have, and we'll go from there. So, Director?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Wall. And we were requested to develop a draft list of stakeholders by the governor's office and the MODIS executive recruiting folks, just to give them a sense of people that they might want to interview or outreach to as they're going through the recruitment process. They obviously are not going to interview every single entity on this list, unless you want to target March of 2025 for your hiring. So that was initial impetus for developing this list. And then I will say that to Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde's comment about watershed councils, the initial approach was we tried to include the umbrella organizations. So you'll see that I have on my original list, I had the Association of Watershed Councils. And for instance, there's land trusts, there's dozens of land trusts, and we had the association that represents land trusts. And then subsequently others got added. So there's some redundancy in this list. Yep. And I think we would not go to individual waters. I'm speculating here, but I don't think the recruiters can go to individual watershed councils and interview them. They're going to go to the umbrella organization that represents all the watershed councils or all the land trusts. Anyway, so there's some redundancy. That's my point. But I agree, Chair Wall, we do have a number of folks signed up to testify. And I think we should go through the public testimony, and then you all can ask any additional questions. And like I say, we're not taking action on this other than moving it forward for action in a couple of weeks.
Terrific. Then let's go to the list. The people that I have on the list are Quinn Reed, Jacob Williams, John Rains, and I would ask Michelle, have other people signed up that I don't have on this? This was an earlier list, so I just want to see if there are any other people that I should have on my list.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Yes, we do have some additional folks that have signed up. I also have Danielle Mosier, Bethany Cotton, and Adam Bronstein that will be testifying virtually today.
Okay, and you said Adam Bronstein?
Correct. And Director Melcher has the list in front of him also.
Great. Then let's start with, so we have, looks like 6 people. Quinn Reed. Go ahead, Quinn.
Great, good morning. Chair Wall, members of the Commission, Director Melcher, my name is Quinn Reed and I am the Conservation Director for Portland Audubon. Soon to be, by the way, formerly Portland Audubon. We'll have a new name to announce in just a few weeks. But we are a member of the Oregon Wildlife Coalition and just want to state that we support the comments of our coalition partners here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on the selection criteria for the new director. And we want to extend thanks to Director Melcher for the progress the agency has made toward embodying its conservation mission under his leadership. You know, big things like adopting the climate and ocean change policy, reinstating the Habitat Division, and launching a collaborative statewide anti-poaching campaign. You know, it's our hope that ODFW will build on these successes under new leadership. So thank you. Overall, we're really encouraged by the materials prepared for the recruitment and encourage you to keep a commitment to conservation and science-based decision-making front and center in the selection criteria. And while experience with natural resources management is of course important, we need a bold leader who will push the agency to use its full authority and expertise to respond to the twin crises of climate change and the extinction crisis. We also believe it's important to select a candidate with a demonstrated ability to build new and diverse constituencies and whose work has embodied the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The agency's long-term relevance and effectiveness depend on being able to engage new generations of Oregonians. Commissioner King, I really like that idea of a generational diplomat. I'd never heard that before, but that really resonated with me. The new director should have a vision and plan to engage those whose voices have been historically marginalized or ignored or sidelined by the agency. And to that end, we support Commissioner Khalil's suggestion to run all of these materials through a formal equity check. I think that's a great idea. On a related note, and given the continuing declines in participation in hunting and fishing, we'd also like to see a director who's committed to seeking creative new revenue streams for the agency. Specifically for Portland Audubon and for our partners in the Oregon Wildlife Rehabilitators Association, we'd like to see a director who sees the wildlife rehab community as partners, as experts in coexistence, and as a critical interface between the public and the agency. Finally, we want to commend you for not being too prescriptive in the minimum education and professional qualifications. We think this is really important for attracting a more diverse group of candidates. Again, we appreciate the transparency and the opportunities for public involvement in this process. Thank you, and we look forward to continuing to work with you through all this and beyond.
Thank you, Gwen. Jacob Williams.
Yes, hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Good morning, members of the commission, Chair Wall and Director Melcher. Let me start by thanking Director Melcher for his service to the state of Oregon and the public trust of its wildlife for nearly 40 years. I only have a few minutes here, so I won't get into the lengthy things that he's accomplished during this time, but I want to extend my appreciation. I want to echo what Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde words on including the change in description to include mentioned parties, which sounds like it's already in motion, so I won't dive any more into that. ODFW's mission statements, which obviously is on the back wall behind you there, to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife and their habitats for use and enjoyment by present and future generations. During a time of ODFW facing increasing challenges regarding management, including attempts to influence management and policies from special interest groups, I would like to strongly encourage the commission to consider a candidate who intends to focus on the enhanced portion of that mission statement. It is impossible to satisfy all the wants of Oregonians when it comes to management decisions. Some have certainly invested more than others in the form of money and hours spent dedicated to wildlife, including a candidate who is familiar with the North American model of wildlife conservation is a must, in my opinion, and one who is willing to weather the difficulty of making decisions for the protection and enhancement of Oregon's fish and wildlife for present and future generations without influence. I want to thank you for your time today. And that concludes my statement.
Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate it. John Raines.
And I believe, Chair Wall, that's the John Raines that signed up under public forum, and he, it looks like he also signed up under this, and he's no longer in the room, so I think we can pass over John.
Thank you. Let's go to Danielle Mosier, and then Bethany Cotton, and then Adam Bronstein.
Great. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Director Melcher, and members of the commission. My name is Danielle Moser, and I'm the Wildlife Program Manager for Oregon Wild. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today on the selection criteria for hiring the next director of ODF&W. This is an incredibly important role, as you all know, within the agency, as this person has the opportunity to lead and shape the vision, drive strategic direction, and guide the implementation of policies and programs that affect fish, wildlife, and habitat conservation for generations to come. We look forward to engaging in this process with you. As you look ahead to hiring the next director, we think it's important we have someone who's ready to expand on the progress that's been made. And my colleague Quinn mentioned some of these same ones, but for example, the increased recognition of the impacts climate change has on fish and wildlife, and the beginning to incorporate solutions at every level of ODFW's work. Reestablishment of the Habitat Division as habitat loss and degradation is a contributing factor, of course, to species decline, and a stronger commitment to stopping the pervasive poaching problem in Oregon. These have all been important steps forward that we hope and expect the next director will be ready to build upon. We also need someone who's ready to lead with a vision for tackling the growing threats posed by climate change and the extinction crisis. With nearly 300 species at an elevated risk of extinction, it's not only important, but imperative for the future of Oregon's fish, wildlife, and habitat that we have a director prepared to take the necessary actions to address these growing challenges. That being said, creating a framework and selection criteria for hiring the next director will be critical. The draft desired attributes document that accompanied today's agenda item is a very good starting point, which I would like to add to. One, a demonstrated commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and experience engaging with historically underrepresented and marginalized communities. And two, an understanding of new trends and modes of communication to engage younger and more diverse groups of people in ODFW's mission and work. Solving today's challenges that face our fish and wildlife will require an all hands on deck approach. To do that, the agency must ensure that all hands are in fact being reached and activated in the mission and vision of the agency. When it comes to communications and engagement, what works for one community may not work for another. And I think, as we're all aware, that engaging younger audiences is incredibly important as we move forward. So, and then finally, while there may be, lots of candidates from within ODFW that apply, I would also like to urge the commission to just strongly consider external candidates as well in this process. As you move forward with candidate recruitment and obviously the eventual interview process, I think it's important the commission hear from a range of people with different perspectives, backgrounds, and experience. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you on this and beyond.
Thank you, Danielle. Let's go then to Bethany Cotton.
Good morning, Chair Wall, Commissioners, and Director Melcher. I'm Bethany Cotton, Conservation Director for Cascadia Wildlands. Cascadia Wildlands works to defend and restore the Cascadia bioregion's wild ecosystems. We are an active member of the Oregon Wildlife Coalition. On behalf of our over 12,000 members and supporters, we thank you for the opportunity to weigh in on key attributes and qualifications for the next leader of ODFW. We appreciate the statements made so far, committing to a broad search for the director, and the thoughtful list of attributes and qualifications posted thus far. We offer a friendly amendment by requesting that the language regarding understanding of and prioritization for addressing the dual climate and biodiversity crisis be strengthened and prioritized. These crises are not, in fact, new or emerging, though they are worsening, and they are impacting all aspects of the department's work. We need a leader who will face these challenges head on and who is dedicated to ensuring the best available science is the basis for all of the department's work and actively integrating new science as it emerges. We also know that hunting continues to decline, while interest in non-consumptive uses of wildlife and habitat, including photography and wildlife watching, hiking, rafting, and more, and understanding the value of the ecosystem services these habitats provide, are ever increasing. Willingness to acknowledge this reality and actively seek alternative funding sources for the agency should be a priority for the new director. We are appreciative of the improvements in the agency's work on recovering threatened and endangered species, promoting natural climate solutions such as beaver restoration, and proactively emphasizing coexistence with wildlife, and look forward to the next director ensuring these programs are fully resourced, both with funding and staff, and that they continue to grow. Thank you for including Cascadia Wildlands and other Oregon Wildlife Coalition members on the stakeholder list. We look forward to further engagement. We also ask that given how traditional hiring processes disadvantage women and people of color and often reflect implicit and explicit biases, that the process employ best practices to ensure a just, diverse, and equitable recruitment and hiring process. In summary, we ask that in keeping with the agency's mission to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife and their habitats for use and enjoyment by present and future generations, you find a candidate who will bring a holistic approach to wildlife conservation, not just management, grounded in science, representative of the vast majority of Oregonians' interests in non-consumptive use of the state's wildlife, and representative of an ever-diversifying agency constituency. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Let's go to Adam Bronstein then.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, well, thank you, members of the commission and Director Melcher, for the opportunity to speak on the hiring of the new director for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. My name is Adam Bronstein. I am the Oregon Director for Western Watersheds Project. The North American model of conservation is no longer an appropriate and workable framework for wildlife management in this age of extinction and changing demographics and value systems. Change is hard, I understand, but we must begin moving forward and move towards a conservation framework that is democratic and represents the broad interests of the public. People value wildlife, and it's not usually through the scope of a rifle or at the end of a hook. According to the public trust doctrine, wildlife is held in trust by the government for the public benefit, not just for hunters and anglers. And for the record, I am a hunter and angler. Most importantly, however, I'm a citizen of a democracy where, at least in theory, the majority of citizens and their interests are properly represented by their government. The greatest threat to my hunting and angling privileges, I believe, aside from dwindling habitat and species loss, is public support and tolerance for this way of life. The person you hired to replace Director Melcher should reflect the values of the majority of Oregonians. In echoing Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, we are a state of bird watchers, wolf advocates, wildlife lovers, hunters, anglers, hikers, forest dwellers, desert rats, wilderness aficionados, etc. Times change and values change. When institutions do not adapt and lag behind, trust is lost and people feel disenfranchised. I'm sorry to say that hunters and anglers no longer represent the majority, and that's an okay thing. And we need not fear change. Instead, as a hunting and angling community, we must speak up on behalf of all wildlife, including predators, and advocate for ethical hunting practices, all of which the public demands. The new director should be somebody with a conservation background who looks to the best science to guide policy. For instance, we now know and appreciate the presence of wolves and predators on our landscape. They help control diseases among ungulates and provide for safer meat consumption for humans. They help control, sorry, I lost my place here. It is time for true coexistence. We now know that hatchery programs are harmful to wild fish populations in all cases where wild fish are present in a system, and these programs should be shut down. We must protect beavers for the expansive habitats they create, natural fire breaks, water storage, water filtration, carbon capture, and more. We need a director who will be unafraid to advocate for hunting and trapping closures of beaver on public lands to gain these ecological services and benefits. To further realize democracy in wild management, the Commission, along with the new director, must work to secure new funding sources that are not tied to consumptive uses. And I will just leave you with one final thought. I hope the Commission will use this important opportunity to hire a new director who upholds the values that reflect the majority of Oregonians. I hope this body will find the courage to support the new director as they implement changes that will be resisted by the status quo. And finally, I hope this body feels a sense of urgency to reform before hunting and angling is forced to take a back seat because the majority's interests were ignored and tossed aside. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. And I think that that is the end of our public testimony. So let's go back then to the commissioners. And if there are summary points that you would like to make or questions that you have, let's start first with any questions on the documents and the components of the recruitment plan. Questions? I don't see any immediately. Mark, did you have any questions, any more questions? If not, we can sort of go to any points that people have and then conclude or try to wrap up with a general approval of this one that is provisional, and we will see this plan again. So any questions? Seeing none, let me first ask Director Melcher if you wanted to make any points or additions to your presentation from earlier, or if we can just go to a wrap up of concluding that the plan as it stands is provisionally approved or not. So Director Melcher.
Well, thank you, Chair Wall. No, I don't have anything more to say at this point other than look forward to the motion to move this forward, and then we'll again stand by you all to to receive a doodle poll request, and of course that'll be a public meeting for your approval of this. We'll of course get the appropriate public notification out as well for that special commission meeting.
Okay, commissioners, we're back to provisionally at least. Are people comfortable moving forward with this, knowing that you and the public will have a chance for input into each of these documents?
Chair Wall, this is Commissioner King. Yes, to answer your question, also just as the summary point is, it will be good to like sit with these documents, look at this a whole lot longer than I looked at them the first time, because I think so many of it, like for example, I did it. I said add this to the stakeholder group, and they were added already. Like it's just so much information and such a long list. And like, I'm the one who added a bunch of watershed councils, and then I looked and the network of watershed councils is on there, but one thing I would note about that group is that they don't have an executive director. So, I mean, it's getting a bit jumbled. So I think if we just have a minute to breathe and look at this, I think that will serve all of us well, because I think a lot of the things that we are asking for is there. We just haven't had the chance to sit with it for long enough. And then, of course, additional edits like what I did for you in terms of editing the attributes bullets and so on. I think there needs to be a lot more round robin and feedback with all of that.
Good point. And I think that's what one of the purposes of today, a key purpose of today, was to get everybody looking at this deeply, get some other ideas, but really give people a chance to understand what was in this packet and all of the different pieces so that we can do a decent look at it and make our comments. So good point, and I think that we accomplished at least some of that today, and appreciate all of the work again, Director Melcher, that you did putting this together so that we could have a first shot at it. It looks like Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde has a hand up.
Yes, I am happy to make a motion if others are not wanting to weigh in some more. Is that all right?
I see no other hands up, so I think that it would be just fine to make such a motion. And everyone, just before you start the motion, commissioners, don't jump off your computer completely as soon as this one is over, because we do have executive session. So go ahead, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde.
Good. Excellent. Okay. I move to approve the draft recruitment plan for the Fish and Wildlife Director position for additional public comment and final approval by the commission at a subsequent meeting.
Second.
All second.
It sounds like it's been moved and seconded twice, and I know that Commissioner Labhart seconded, but I think somebody else did as well, to move the draft recruitment plan forward for additional input and comments. Michelle, can we do a roll call on this?
Spellbrink,
I wasn't quite ready. Yes.
Labhart,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Khalil,
Yes.
Hatfield-Hyde,
Yes.
Wall.
Yes. Thank you all, especially Director Melcher for the massive amount of work, and of course Modus for their work, and staff who have been working on this on top of everything else they're already doing. So this was a big step to get this piece, so we have provisional approval of our plan to go forward and get more comment on. And with that, I would like to stop on the recruitment work and read into the record the script for executive session. And then we will ask Michelle to make sure we know exactly how to do this, because we're going to sign off. So we'll end the regular session, go into executive session, and then we will come back into regular session just to adjourn for the day. So I'd like to read this. Bear with me. The commission will now meet in executive session. This executive session is to consider information and records that are exempt by law from public inspection as authorized by ORS 192.6602F, as well as to consult with legal counsel concerning legal rights and duties regarding real estate as authorized by ORS 192.6602H. So the meeting is we are adjourned for now on the regular session. Commissioners, let's listen to Michelle for a minute to know exactly how we sign off this one and sign in on the executive session. Michelle?
Thank you, Chair Wall. Commissioners, can I have you go ahead and leave this meeting, go ahead and sign out of this meeting, and then you had received a meeting invite with the link that will connect us to the executive session. We're going to change rooms, so give us a few minutes and we will be able to join the other meeting with you.
So shall we plan on that at 11:30? And Commissioner Labhart, I think you have now the number to call in for the executive session.
I do. Thank you.
Perfect. Then we will reconvene at 11:30. And if all of you will sign back on as Michelle just described, thank you all very much.
Going to the conference room upstairs, Michelle? Oh, classroom.